We are going to talk about the hype train that is AI, because that's what it is, right?
Right.
We're at NADA. Every other booth has a version of AI or a piece of that technology associated to that product. I want to start off with the quote we talked about last time. It says, AI will not take your job. Someone who knows how to use AI will. How important is it for dealers to understand how to apply AI, number one? And then number two, how it directly should apply to their operation. Not just it as a technology that's out there and available, because we can all get it.
Right.
How do dealers separate the two? Just because it exists doesn't mean you need it. You need to focus on the type that's going to actually help your business.
Yeah.
What conversations have you had getting into that?
I think that's something that's interesting about right now, especially with how big OpenAI has become and how accessible ChatGPT is now. There is a lot more accurate information out there and available. And so I think that we're going to start, for the past couple of years, all you said was AI and artificial intelligence, like a catchphrase. But it's not a catchphrase. It has a real definition, and it's an umbrella of systems. And I think it's more important now to even answer that question. We have to start talking more specifically about the types of AI that we're using, the types of AI that a company is advertising. Like, I don't think just saying, I have AI is enough anymore. Let's start actually asking, okay, are you using generative? Are you using an NLP? And I think dealers can more easily educate themselves, because now you can find more layman's terms, definitions out there. You can find books that are easier to read. Before the past 3 or 4 years, if you disagree, let me know, but learning about AI was hard because a lot of the documents out there were like so technical, and it's a hard concept to understand. But with ChatGPT, you're finding a lot, like, people are just hungry, and I'm finding articles, things that like anybody, any dealership could pick up and read and actually start to understand what is the difference between natural language processing, what is the difference between Dolly and how I'm going to use images and AI images versus emails that might have the context of what they're, of the context that they're replying to, versus emails that are actually written by AI. All three of those are distinct technologies, and they're not one and the same. Does that kind of make sense? Like,
I think when I answer the question, so I agree. When I answer the question, I think about it from the position of the owner, of the dealership, GM, head of sales, service, so at various levels, I think the perspective is different, right?
Yeah.
From an owner, I'm tired of seeing my staff turned over. I'm tired of seeing lower performance from some of the individuals in the staff. I'm tired of the long onboarding or staff not even understanding my product, right? Mm-hmm. And you struggle with that, right? So when you think about AI, you're like, yeah, do I replace people? If I'm the owner, I'm like, I hope so, because then it'll reduce my operating costs and maybe the experience goes up. But I think at the end of the day, people buy from people. So the answer is no.
Right.
But how can I augment those teams in such a way that, they become superhuman in the dealership? But one more comment.
Sorry, yeah.
But the neat thing about what OpenAI has done with ChatGPT is now everybody can get a sense immediately of what it means.
Yes,
You don't have to read an NLP document. It's like, okay, I played with it. This is pretty damn amazing. I can ask it any question, and it'll give me a conversationally relevant answer. So how do I apply this to my business? Well, I'd like to have a lot of those working for me, right? I'd like to have a ChatGPT in finance. I'd like to have it in marketing. I'd like to have it, in sales and service. And so it's kind of like, okay, now how do I bring this kind of digital persona, this capability, to fruition in the dealership? That's the big leap, right?
How do you actually use it in real world applications?
And you're going to augment your team. You're not going to replace it.
No, yeah. I was reading something, and it was like talking about how, any passion becomes a job, and it can ruin dreams. It can make something that you love, and all of a sudden it becomes work. And it's because with everything, to make money off of it, you have to do paperwork. You have to do all these things that can just suck the fun out of, maybe your passion was cars, but then with it, all the paperwork to just sell a car. So what could AI replace that you don't want to do? Like, let's just start there. What's something in my day I really dislike doing? You know what? I really don't like writing emails. Okay, well, let me start there. Let me replace that one task. Maybe not replace it, but make it easier for me to write a more effective email faster, so I can actually focus on doing what I'm good at.
Yeah, or writing, marketing content, right? Copy. I want to kind of take my initial thoughts and expand on it. It's kind of like collaborating with a team of content designers. You now have this plethora of information in these large language models. You can kind of throw your ideas at it and say, how would you change this? And so you can play with the content, I think is pretty powerful for the marketeer at the dealership. You're going to have a weekend event, and I want to get something really sticky. Let's play with that a little bit.
I did some experimenting on my LinkedIn, and I mean, super, no official experiment, but I was just interested. And I did some posts that I wrote, and I thought they were okay. But then I used their, writing like 20 sentences, and it rewrites it. The AI post got more interactions, more engagement than any of the posts I wrote myself. And that was a little bit like, okay, how does that make me feel? Does that wait a second? But at the same time, I was like, hey, you know what? I've never really felt confident posting too much on LinkedIn because I didn't feel confident in what I was writing, and that may have held me back from meeting people, from making connections on a great platform. And now I have a tool that I can just hit a button and I feel much more confident in what I'm about to post.
Yeah.
And
so powerful for the marketeers at the dealership. But I think the conversation needs to go to the rest of the functions, right?
Yes.
F&I, sales, service, what can we do in those spots?
Yeah, how does it maximize whatever my objective is still? Yeah. Because like what you're saying, it builds that confidence, but also how did it make you feel? Like, well, it was still your original idea. Because we all, at times, have great ideas, and we can't articulate them exactly how they're happening, right? AI has opened up a new way to do that. That's just another function of using it in a creative way. I always like to call it my extra brain, or the other part of my brain that I can collaborate with. Because you have the idea, the nugget's there, but someone has already figured out a part that you haven't been able to get to because you're so busy. Like, I just got to think about this main point. Now, how do I say that main point? And how do I write that main point? You spend all that energy getting there. You're like, this has got to be good enough. Now you incorporate the functionality of AI. It can go the next portion of it and give you some brain capacity to continue that collaboration. Hey, I like how so-and-so did this. I saw a commercial that showed X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Here's my concept. But do it in the tone of this thing that I saw. Then you look at what comes out.
Well, yeah, let's use a maybe practical example, maybe not so practical. So you got a young salesperson on the lot, right? And family comes in and they're going to buy a new car, and they really like the particular OEM that you're really super knowledgeable about. Yeah. So you're stoked. But maybe the wife in the couple says, but I've been looking at this other car and I want to know what the differences are. Now, you may be up to speed on what you're carrying, but you don't know anything about what's going on down the street.
Exactly.
So maybe you're like, okay, give me a few minutes, and you go back, go to ChatGPT, say I've got a young couple with 2 kids, they're looking at these 2 vehicles. Give me the top 10 differences, for safety, blah, blah, blah. Boom. You can have information at your fingertips. That's powerful, right? And that could be really useful for a seller.
As long as it's accurate. And so, the generative, it's still young. And we have to remember that ChatGPT is the most commonly talked about one today because it's so you can just Google OpenAI and you can start playing with it, like you were saying. but their model is not specific to an industry, right? So you can't guarantee that what you're going to get out is even factual. They don't there's no concept of fact checking.
Yeah.
So you do want to look at companies that have been training their model with industry specific data, and that's not easy. It's not cheap, and it takes a long time. And so when you're looking at these companies that are just now coming out with their version of AI, do ask those questions. Are they using ChatGPT? That's not necessarily bad, but just be aware that it's not industry specific. Did they make their own? Is it proprietary? Okay, how mature is it? Because from everything that I know about this field, like, there is no overnight there's no concept of that. It takes a lot of data to even come to any sort of usable conclusion, and that just takes time. So just things to think about. Jeff Bezos, when he started Amazon, he chose to sell books, and because he was so interested in the internet. Because the internet had just kind of come out, and he's like, how can I capitalize on this? Well, I'm going to sell books. And his reason for selling books was because there are more books in production than you could fit in a physical space. So selling books online was the only solution to that problem, because you couldn't have a store big enough. And so he explained it as if a new technology comes out and there's a more traditional way to do something, you should probably still do it in that traditional way. You should use the new technology to solve a problem you couldn't solve any other way until that technology matures. Itself.
So there's more information than similar, like more books that you can physically put in a shop. There's more information that you can put in the heads of your service or sales folks on the lot, right?
That's how you turn it. I love there's two concepts you mix, and it's the maturity, right? Because that's a question that a lot of people don't know to ask, because the concept is what the concept is. There's no concept of understanding that you still have to, the AI has to grow.
Yeah.
In the same way our brains have to mature. AI just does that really fast because of what it's fed. Same thing, what you're fed changes how you're made up as well. Yeah. So that maturity question is definitely something you have to factor in, because it also just doesn't matter if you can't do anything about it, but it might dictate how your responses are coming on what information you get back. But also, thinking of AI and any other new technology is, what solution is this providing? What challenge is it solving?
Well, one comment on that, though, the maturity. So everybody's listening going, okay, so when's it going to be ready for me, right? When are you going to be able to program it on my dealership inventory, my data, me, right? And I think the answer is now. I think it is actually now.
Especially with the right companies.
Yeah, I think the fun fact is a small team out of Google and this little group called Google Brain, they're actually the ones that came up with this transform model. They wrote a paper, and it blew up from there. Basically, everything that OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, all are doing, Meta, is based on this small group's innovation. When we jumped into the mix in 2020, it was about 40% accurate. Well, that's okay if you don't mind it getting the answers right 1 out of 2 times, or less than 1 out of 2 times. 2021, 60% accurate. 2022, 85%. 2023, last year, finally inching to a point where, it's not going to sell your car for $1. Right, so I think we're there.
Yeah.
I think we're there. But you're right. You got to pick the mature vendors, absolutely, and you got to take folks like Auto Alert that are basically doing the right things to screen for their customers, right? Screening,
because you don't want it to sell a car for $1. An interesting application that is something we might start seeing is. Something that ChatGPT or those types of technologies are very good at is actually writing code. That's something that they're pretty good at. And so this concept of talk to your data. So we have dealerships who want to be able to more accessibly create their own reports, get answers to questions that they would need a developer or SQL experience to actually query their database. And this idea is that you say, you ask a complex question about your data, and it'll actually write the SQL for you
Yeah.
and output
Yeah.
results. And it's called Talk to Your Data. I think that's interesting, and that's something that, we're kind of exploring with our other
And I think you're going to see some tools where BI evolves, because conversational BI is not a new concept.
Right.
Actually, a lot of companies did it the old-fashioned way, and now you can actually put an LLM type of front end to your BI tool and kind of advance it. So I think what you'll find is companies that are providing great technology solutions today, like AutoAlert, are going to embed, and kind of, it's going to become an enhancement. It's not a application by itself. It's not an industry by itself. It's a technology that becomes enabling for more, I think, better experience for the folks in the back office and, of course, the customers. Yes, right.
It's very exciting. I think where we're at is right at it's we're moving out of its infancy. We're like really turning. It's almost like a teenager now. We're really going to start to see it being applied in more useful ways, and it's kind of exciting just to see what's going to come out of this.
Yeah, I mean, just literally in this last quarter of 2023. I gave that history of confidence in the technology. So we've been waiting, and we've been working, and we've been trying to get it to a point where, the biggest groups in the world can be comfortable that their brand's not going to be smeared by something, right? So I think we're there. What it translates into is you're going to have your own basically your own large language model for you, right? So you're going to have the ability to define the information, the domain of information. So it can get a little verbose, but it's verbose about your information. So it's not going to hallucinate on to something else.
Right.
And I think we're there. So I think the answer, the question is, it's not going to replace people. It's going to augment. And it is ready for any dealership at this point. So, get curious.
And it's ready in the right use cases. I don't think it's ready to just unleash and just let it start auto emailing your customers. Like it's still at a point where it still needs human eyes to fact check it, human eyes to maybe revise it a little bit, add that human touch to it. Things like language itself is so complex. How we speak. Think about words that have the same, like one word that has two different meanings.
Right.
As people here, if I use a word like that, you guys would know what I was talking about because we're in whatever context we're in.
And I have other signals to pick up on.
I got to tell you, our AI supports Japanese, and it's not easy.
Language.
Oh my God, it's not easy.
And that's not just an us problem. That is language barriers is a problem with LLMs right now. It is very difficult.
Tonal languages changes the meaning. I mean, it's complex.
Yes.
But I will say, it's about there. I mean, every language, right now, I think over 100 languages supported, from vendors that really know how. Mm-hmm. So we can go global for large businesses. But I mean, for a North America dealership, you're like, okay, maybe I want my Hispanic audience. Mm-hmm. You don't need to have 23 languages, maybe just a few.
I need this, and so there's other applications there, even just from understanding language. I don't necessarily have a full bilingual staff. However, we can still accommodate that and somehow apply AI to pick up on that. Not just translating, but how do we communicate in a way that helps this consumer, right? Now you start thinking about mixing technologies. We talk about AI and then how some things are tonal, so you mix the sonic version of, okay, the AI heard what they said and understood the words.
Yeah.
What if there's a visual component that the AI can watch in real time and analyze based on that type of information as well? There's a lot of other doors.
I think for now, body language, get the person in the dealership,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And then, when you're after hours and your staff's sleeping, you still want the AI working for you. So when you do your morning stand-up meeting, you got a bunch of inquiries that came in that were automatically responded to. I mean, these are the things you can do today, right?
Yeah, and I mean, and just like, it's new right now. So when somebody sees something written by ChatGPT, right now we're like, oh my gosh, that was written by AI. This is incredible. It's so good.
Yeah.
But people are gonna start to be able to recognize it they're gonna be able to kind of start to tell the difference. And humans will evolve slightly different. Humans will start to write in a different way. It's gonna change. It's gonna be very interesting to see those social aspects that actually end up changing. And what our younger generation, what the next generation comes up, the generation that grew up with this, the generation that grew up with these community, like being able to talk back and forth with a computer and actually have a human-like kind of conversation, and how they perceive that as they get older, and then how those changes then influence the new models, right? Like you can go down a path of Will Smith and the iRobot.
But my vision for the dealership is I don't want folks to write emails. I want them to direct their digital team members and their staff, more strategically thinking about, well, how do I get folks within a 10-mile radius to come into my service center who haven't actually bought from me but have my car OEM and they're in my neighborhood, for example.
Think about your database, right? Like, you couldn't physically email all of those customers, really individualized, personalized messages, and get to all of your customers. A human couldn't do that. But now we can actually send not just auto blast emails, but very catered, very tailored messages that the customer receives and most likely will not know it was written by not a person. So you can actually be engaging long-term with every single customer in your database at all times, very specifically to that customer. That is not something that was ever possible until right now.
And it's consistent. I've seen the situation where our AI picked up a conversation that was occurring over a year. And the person was like, oh, you're still at the dealership. And you still remember who I am. So remember my comment about staff turnover?
Yeah.
Your AI doesn't turn over. You give it a name and Rachel's always there, and always has context. Email has now become just conversation. It's not an email, it's a conversation.
It's a conversation,
And you can go dynamically back and forth, but you can also reference the history because it's in the CRM. So it's pretty powerful.
Good.
So I'm glad we got on the topic of the communication aspect, because that is immediately useful in the dealership. And we have some challenges with consistency in that communication and professionalism, and specifically just going to fault code. We know that is something that is an ongoing challenge for our dealers, and dealerships recognize that. Like, it's not just a revolving door. It's the people I have here wane and fatigue in certain areas. So to kind of finish out, the conversation, let's talk about the exact application of how to react and work with the dealers to implement the process of knowing you have conversations going on with AI. What does your team do with it? Right? How do we capitalize after those conversations? And just let's sum it up with a hack. Like, here's what you need to do once you have AI installed in your dealership.
The human element is still needed. So we can bring you to the water, and if your AI recognizes, hey, at this point in time, I need human intervention, and you're alerted and you're notified, you need to act on that. That's all you got to do. Just actually do something with that information. We just service you. Call the customer. We can't solve every problem today. At some point, you do have to pick up the phone.
I think if someone's on the website, they fill out a form, you follow up instantly with AI, you're going to not lose that customer to the next dealer down the block. Someone phones in and you get their information, AI follows up. I think you can basically be in a position where you'll always be the first. If you're the one that's chosen to implement AI and your peers haven't, you will always be the first to get that person. But of course, now what's going to happen is the AI's total, purpose in life is to get you to come in.
Yep.
Right? I want you to come in and talk to my sales team, or go to the service center and get your repair order filled, or you get your recall, serviced, etc., or your warranty extended. But I think these are all specific outcomes that the AI is kind of programmed to accomplish, with the end goal of, I'm going to get you to talk to somebody at the dealership.
Yep.
Well, that was a fantastic conversation. I know there's plenty more we can say, but I'm glad we finished it off with just, hey, here's what you do right now. Just talk to me. So, Jim, as always,
Thanks,
thank
Charles.
you. Angela, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.